The morning the world turned against her did not come with thunder, yet Alina felt a storm gathering the moment she stepped into the courtyard where cold winds always seemed to blow no matter the season, and where her in-laws stood waiting with the same accusing eyes that had followed her for 3 years, eyes that had never once softened for her even when she worked before sunrise, even when she carried their burdens without complaint, even when she sacrificed her own dreams just to keep peace. In a home that was never truly hers, yet today something felt different, something sharp and heavy in the air, and as she noticed the tense, almost triumphant expressions on their faces, her stomach tightened with a nameless fear, because she had learned to read storms in silence, and right now the silence was screaming. Her mother-in-law stepped forward first, her voice cutting through the early morning haze like a knife dipped in ice, accusing Alina of dishonesty, of betrayal, of actions she would never commit even in her worst nightmares, and the family gathered around her in a circle of hostility, throwing words like stones, each one hitting harder than the last, each one pulling apart the fragile hope she had desperately held on to. She tried to speak, to defend herself, to remind them of the trust she had given them, but her voice trembled beneath the weight of injustice, and her words were drowned by the rising shouts of those who had never truly listened to her anyway. Every insult felt like another door slamming shut inside her heart, and as they moved closer, their intention not to physically harm her but to humiliate her emotionally, to break her spirit in the one place she had left, her dignity, she stood frozen, helpless, her hands cold, her breath shallow, her vision blurry not with tears but with disbelief that the people she had spent years trying to please were now bent on crushing her completely. She felt alone, smaller than she had ever felt, the sky above her wide and merciless, the dusty ground beneath her feet the only witness to the cruelty unfolding around her. The accusations grew louder, fiercer, like a wildfire fed by bitter hearts, and no matter how much she pleaded, they twisted her words, twisted her truth, twisted her very existence into something ugly and false, making her feel like a stranger in a place she once tried to call home. The weight of 3 years, 3 long, exhausting years of endurance, collapsed on her shoulders all at once, and she wondered if this was the moment she would finally break, the moment her spirit would scatter like dust across the courtyard floor. But just when everything was about to shatter, when her knees trembled and her heart pounded like it was pleading for escape, a deep thundering sound broke through the chaos, hoofbeats echoing down the long dirt road leading to the ranch, a sound strong enough to silence the shouting, a sound powerful enough to make every head turn. And then he appeared. Dane Calder, the lone rancher whose presence alone could quiet a storm, rode into the yard with the kind of authority that didn't need words, the kind of calm strength that only men forged by wilderness and hardship carried in their bones. He dismounted slowly, dust swirling around his boots, his sharp, steady gaze moving across the gathered crowd like he was measuring their intentions, their cruelty, their unspoken guilt. He was not a man of many words, but when he did speak, even the mountains seemed to listen, and right now, silence fell like a blanket as he walked toward the center of the courtyard, toward Alina, who stood pale and trembling, her heart pounding so loudly she wondered if he could hear it too. His eyes softened when they landed on her bruised spirit, but when he looked at her in-laws, something cold and fierce blazed in his expression, something that made even the boldest among them step back a little. "That's enough," he said, his voice low but edged with steel, a warning wrapped in calmness, a storm hiding inside a whisper. No one dared answer him. No one dared challenge him. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Dane turned his attention back to Alina, his expression shifting from fierce protectiveness to something almost gentle, the kind of gentleness she hadn't felt from anyone in years, the kind that didn't pity her but acknowledged her pain without making her feel weak. And then, in a moment that froze everyone in place, he reached out his hand toward her, not to claim her, not to control her, but to offer her a choice, a lifeline, a way out of the darkness she had been trapped in for far too long. "You're coming with me," he said, not as a command, but as a promise, a vow, a declaration that she did not have to remain in a place that sought to tear her apart. For a heartbeat, Alina couldn't move, she was too stunned, too overwhelmed, too unsure if she even deserved to be rescued. But there was something in his voice, something steady. Something unwavering, something safe, that reached past her fear and touched the part of her soul that still believed she deserved better than this, that still whispered she was more than the cruelty she had endured. Her in-laws protested weakly, But even their voices lacked conviction now. The rancher's presence had carved through their arrogance like a blade through brittle wood. Dane didn't look at them again, he kept his gaze on Alina, waiting for her answer, and in that silence, she realized that this moment, this choice, could change everything. If she stayed, she would continue living in the shadows of accusations and suffering. If she left, even though it terrified her, she might finally find the strength to breathe again. With trembling hands and a heart that felt fragile yet awakening, she placed her hand in his. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel hostile. It felt open. It felt possible. Dane gently guided her toward his horse, shielding her from the hostile eyes still watching, and as she lifted herself into the saddle, she felt a surge of courage rise within her, not because he saved her, but because she had chosen to take a step toward freedom. As the horse began to move, she looked back at the place she once called home and realized it had never been her home at all. Ahead of her lay an uncertain path, but for the first time, uncertainty felt like hope. And as Dane rode beside her, the sun breaking through the clouds as if blessing her escape, she whispered to herself, and to every viewer listening to her story, sometimes you have to walk away from what breaks you to discover what can build you. If you believe in strength, courage, and new beginnings, make sure you subscribe, because stories like this can change more than just a day, they can change a life.